How often do we walk past what really matters? We see the need, we feel the nudge, but we hesitate. Maybe it's awkward, maybe we're busy, maybe we think someone else will step up. But what if love didn't wait for the perfect moment? What if love moved? What if it showed up when the world walked away? This week on Lenses of Love, we're exploring how real love doesn't ask, do I have to help? But how can I help? You ever have one of those moments where you just know you should do something, but for some reason you hesitate? It could be something as simple as holding the door open for someone who's just a little too far away, or as big as stepping in for someone who clearly needs help. It's that split-second decision where your brain races with excuses. Someone else will do it. I'm busy, or it's awkward, it's not really my problem. It happens to all of us. Let me tell you about a day that really stuck with me. I was at a Starbucks, headphones in, laser focused on my laptop, minding my own business. That's when I noticed the guy sitting at the table next to me. He just spilled his entire drink all over his laptop, his papers, the table, everywhere. I'm talking full-on catastrophe mode. And here's the thing. I didn't jump up right away. I just sat there watching. As this little mental battle started in my head, I kept telling myself things like, someone else who works here will handle it. I don't have enough napkins at my table. I'm busy right now, I've got things to do. What if he thinks I'm interfering? What if I make things worse? While I sat there thinking about helping, you know what happened? 3 other people walked right by him. One person even moved to a different table just to avoid the whole thing. And suddenly, as I watched this guy scramble, I felt it, that nudge, that reminder. It's funny how, in moments like this, a simple choice to act or ignore can hold so much weight. It's like we're walking this invisible line, teetering between stepping up or stepping back. And it's not just about spilled drinks, it's about how we live. It reminded me of something Jesus said, a story he told about a man who got jumped on a dangerous road and left for dead. And about how all these good religious people walked right past him like he wasn't even there. They had their excuses just like I did, but then something unexpected came along. Someone with every reason not to care chose to stop. Let's be real, this story isn't just about what happened on a dusty road in ancient history. It's about us. It's about the roads we walk every day, the choices we make, the people we pass. Because whether we realize it or not, we are walking down that same road, and God is watching to see if we'll cross the line into love or let excuses hold us back. But here's the thing, love isn't easy. It's inconvenient. It's messy. It's often uncomfortable. Helping someone means stepping into their world for a moment, and sometimes that's the last thing we feel like doing. Whether it's offering a listening ear, speaking up when it's awkward, or simply being present when someone is struggling, love asks something of us. Maybe for you, it's seeing someone sitting alone at lunch and deciding whether or not you should join them. Maybe it's hearing about a coworker who's going through something rough and asking yourself, do I step in or do I stay quiet? Or maybe it's that one friend who's been posting things that scream, I need help, but reaching out feels like it might be uncomfortable. We don't always get it right. We miss opportunities. We look back and think, man, I should have done something. That's life. But what if we started seeing these moments differently? What if we recognize that these little nudges to act are invitations, not just to help someone else, but to grow ourselves? What if every inconvenience, every hesitation, every moment of doubt was a chance to say, I'm going to show up anyway? Today, we're talking about the kind of love that doesn't just wait for the perfect moment. The kind of love that sees the mess, hears the excuses, and steps in anyways. The kind of love that doesn't ask, do I have to help, but instead asks, how can I help? So as we get into the story today, I want you to imagine that road to Jericho isn't some far off place. It's your hallway, it's your classroom, it's your workspace, it's your social media feed. I want you to think about the people you might be walking past, the moments you might be hesitating, and ask yourself, what would it look like to stop? Because the truth is, love isn't passive. Love moves, love sees, love shows up. And when we choose to show up, we begin to see life through a new lens. Historically, people have drawn lines to separate themselves by race, status, culture, or background. But the Good Samaritan parable reminds us that God's love and compassion are not constrained by those boundaries. Instead, they break through barriers, calling us to see everyone as our neighbor. When Jesus shared this story, the tension between Jews and Samaritans wasn't just about minor disagreements. It was rooted in centuries of hostility, mistrust, and prejudice. In the same way, Black History Month serves as a reminder of the systemic racism, oppression, and segregation that has existed for generations. Yet despite those barriers, there have been countless examples of people who have chosen to love their neighbors even when society told them they didn't have to. Harriet Tubman comes to mind. She risked her life repeatedly to lead enslaved people to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Harriet didn't ask herself, do I have to help these people? She didn't weigh whether her neighbors were worthy of her help or deserving of her sacrifice. Instead, she stepped in with courage and compassion, embodying the Samaritan spirit by helping those in desperate need, even at a great personal cost. Her actions challenge us to reflect on how we view those who are different from us. Do we see them as neighbors, or do we let fear, prejudice, or indifference dictate our actions? Like Harriet, we are called to love boldly, crossing boundaries to help those who are hurting. Today, the barriers we face may look different, but they're just as real. Maybe it's not racial segregation, but social media algorithms that silo us into echo chambers. Or maybe it's not the physical walls, but invisible walls we build in our hearts, judgments, assumptions, or apathy. In Black history and in Jesus' story, the message is clear. Breaking down those walls starts with a shift in perspective. Loving our neighbor means going beyond the superficial and stepping into someone else's story. It means recognizing that we all have the capacity to show compassion, regardless of whether we identify with someone's struggle or not. For the Samaritan, loving his neighbor wasn't about shared heritage, it was about shared humanity. Similarly, Black History Month reminds us to honor the shared humanity of those who have been marginalized and overlooked. In our daily lives, this could mean standing up against injustice when we see it. Maybe it's speaking out when a coworker makes a discriminatory remark. Maybe it's educating ourselves and about cultures and experiences different from our own. Or maybe it's as simple as reaching out to someone who feels isolated or unseen. When we ask, who is my neighbor, we often look for people who fit neatly into our comfort zones. But Jesus flips the question, who can you be a neighbor to? In this way, he calls us to act not out of obligation, but out of love. And as we look at the example of those who have fought for equality, freedom, and justice, we're reminded that being a neighbor often requires stepping out of our comfort zones. If there's one thing the Good Samaritan story teaches us, it's that loving others isn't always convenient or easy. There are real barriers, both internal and external, that get in the way. And especially during Black History Month, we can draw from the lessons of history to confront these barriers head on. But before we dive in, let's take a quick break.
Hello, good to see you today here at the Lenses of Love set. I love to watch Sam's message and learn from him how to see God and His Word through the lenses of love. Perhaps you would like to learn more about other questions of life. For example, why am I here? Is there a God? Why is there so much evil and suffering? And why are there so many different religions? And which one is true? Is the Bible fact or fiction? Who is Jesus of Nazareth? Was he truly God as Christians say he is? Why did Jesus come to earth to die? And how does his death offer us salvation? What happens when I die? Is there really a heaven or a hell? These questions and others we answer on our online Bible study platform at hopestudy.ca. There, you will find answers to these and other crucial life questions. We would love to hear from you. Please email us at hopestudy@hopetv.ca. And remember, there is hope and answers to life's biggest questions in the Word of God.
Let's start with fear. Fear is one of the most universal barriers to love. It's what kept the priest and the Levite in Jesus' parable from helping the injured man. Fear convinces us that stepping in might be too risky, too complicated, or too uncomfortable. We've all felt it, right? That hesitation when we see someone in need and think, what if I get it wrong? What if it's dangerous? What if they don't want me to help? Fear also played a significant role in the civil rights movement. Activists like Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and countless others faced unimaginable fear, threats, violence, imprisonment, and yet they chose to act anyway. They remind us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to love and act in spite of it. For us, overcoming fear might not look like marching in protests or risking our lives, but it might mean stepping into uncomfortable conversations. It might mean reaching out to someone who's different from us or standing up for what's right when it would be easier to stay silent. Another major barrier is busyness. We live in a culture that glorifies being busy. The priest and the Levite likely had schedules to keep, people to see, responsibilities to fulfill. Sound familiar? How often do we pass by opportunities to love our neighbors because we're just too busy? Think about the Montgomery bus boycott, a movement that lasted over a year. Ordinary people gave up their convenience for the sake of justice. They walked miles to work, carpooled with strangers, and sacrificed their time and energy for something bigger than themselves. It's a reminder that that love often requires us to pause, to interrupt our schedules, and to prioritize what truly matters. For us, this might mean rethinking how we use our time. Are we so busy chasing personal success or meeting deadlines that we miss the people right in front of us? Sometimes being a neighbor is as simple as making space in our lives for others, whether that's listening to a friend in need, volunteering in our community, or simply being present. Finally, there's judgment. The priest and Levite may have looked at that injured man and thought, this isn't my responsibility. They may have judged him as unworthy of their help. Judgment creates distance and allows us to rationalize our inaction. Judgment often stems from ignorance or stereotypes. One of the most powerful stories that counters this is that friendship between Frederick Douglass, an escaped slave, and Abraham Lincoln. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, Douglass and Lincoln built a relationship based on mutual respect and shared goals. Their story reminds us that breaking down judgment starts with seeing others as individuals, not categories. So how do we overcome these barriers? Here are a couple steps you can take. The first thing you can do is acknowledge your fears. Name what's holding you back. Fear loses its power when we bring it into light. Another thing you can do is make time for others. Reevaluate your priorities and create space for relationships. And the third thing you can do is challenge your judgments. When you catch yourself making assumptions, ask, what's the story I'm not seeing here? Another thing you can do is learn from history. Take time to educate yourself about the struggles and triumphs of those who have gone before us. Understanding their stories can inspire us to love more boldly. Overcoming barriers to love isn't easy, but it's essential. Whether it's fear, busyness, or judgment, Jesus calls us to push past the excuses and embrace the opportunity to be a neighbor. And as we reflect on the legacy of those who have fought for justice, we're reminded that love has the power to change lives, not just for those we help, but for us as well. When Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan, he makes one thing unmistakably clear. Love isn't just a feeling, it's action. Real love is tangible. It shows up, it steps in, and it does the work. This is where the Samaritan sets himself apart from the others in the story. While the priest and the Levite saw their need and crossed the road to avoid it, the Samaritan moved towards the mess. He got his hands dirty. He used his own resources. He gave his time and his energy to help someone who can never repay him back. Let's be real. Loving people can get messy. It's inconvenient. It disrupts our plans. And sometimes it's downright uncomfortable. But that's what makes love so powerful. The Samaritan didn't wait for the perfect moment to step in. He didn't ask if the injured man had earned his help or if he deserved it. He simply saw someone in need and responded with compassion. It being Black History Month, we can see the same spirit of active love in countless men and women who chose to show up even when it was messy or uncomfortable. Think about the Freedom Riders in the 1960s, groups of young people, both black and white, who rode buses into the segregated South to challenge racial injustice. They faced violence, they faced imprisonment and threats, but they didn't turn back. Why? Because they believed love required action. They knew that to change the world, they couldn't just talk about love, they had to live it. Their courage forces us to ask a tough question. What's keeping us from showing up in our own lives? Are we afraid of getting too involved? Are we worried about what people will think? Do we tell ourselves, someone else will do it. Someone else will handle it. It's easy to make excuses, but the truth is God calls us to move toward the mess, toward the people who are hurting, who are struggling, who are feeling unseen. Here's the thing. Love in action doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always about big movements or historic sacrifices. Sometimes it's as simple as showing up for someone in small but meaningful ways. The Samaritan didn't fix the entire road to Jericho. He didn't eliminate crime or create policy for safer travel. He just helped the person in front of him. Let me tell you about something that I saw recently. I was at a grocery store, waiting in line to check out. You know how it is. Everyone's in a rush, checking their phones, huffing impatiently when the line doesn't move fast enough. In front of me was an older woman trying to pay, but her card wasn't working. She looked embarrassed and overwhelmed. People started glancing around, some rolling their eyes, others quietly judging. For a moment, it felt like everyone decided it wasn't their problem. Then this young guy, maybe 18 or 19, quietly stepped up, pulled out his wallet, and covered her bill. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't expect anything in return. He just stepped in, did what needed to be done, and moved on. The woman thanked him through tears, and the entire vibe of that checkout line had changed. It was like a weight had been lifted. You know why? Because one person decided to show up. That man didn't fix the world's problems that day. He didn't find world peace, but in that small moment, he reflected God's love in a way that rippled far beyond the checkout line. His kindness reminded me and everyone who saw it that love in action isn't complicated. It's just about helping the person that's right in front of you. You might think, what difference does it make if I check on that quiet classmate or invite someone to sit with me? But love, like that small act in that grocery store, has a way of growing. You don't always see the impact right away, but small actions of kindness and compassion can bear fruit in ways you may never realize. Think about it. Rosa Parks' decision to stay seated on that bus seems small in the moment, but that one act of courage sparked a movement. Love in action doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to be powerful. Sometimes it's a text message, a listening ear, or a simple act of inclusion. When we show up for people, God uses those moments to create something bigger than we ever could have imagined. So, what does it mean to show up in today's world? I'll tell you right after this short break.
Hello friends, it is great to be here with you on Lenses of Love today. I trust that you've been blessed by this program, and I hope that you're able to share it with your loved ones. Thank you for your support so far. It means the world to us, really. And if you want to help us, if you haven't already partnered with us as an agent of hope, I briefly wanted to share with you how to do so. Above all, we desire your prayers. Please remember those who are involved with Hope Channel Canada and the production of its programs, as well as the different initiatives that we'll be launching throughout the country. I also ask your prayers for the hearts of people all across Canada, that they will be open to learning that in Jesus there is more to life. Anytime you have to spare in order to volunteer with one of our projects will be greatly appreciated. Please feel free to contact us at either agentsofhope@hopetv.ca or visit agentsofhope.ca to have your questions answered and to learn where you can be of service. And finally, your financial support would be greatly appreciated, and any amount makes a huge difference in impacting Canadians all across our nation. Please visit agentsofhope.ca so that you can donate online via debit, credit, Google Pay, or Apple Pay to make a one-time or recurring donation. If you prefer to donate offline, you can e-transfer us at agentsofhope@hopetv.ca or mail a check to Hope Channel Canada at the following address: Hope Channel Canada, 1148 King Street East, Oshawa, Ontario, L1H1H8. Thank you once again for joining us on this exciting journey.
So, what does it mean to show up? It might look like standing up for someone who's being mistreated, even if it costs you socially. Speaking words of encouragement to someone who feels invisible. Learning about the experiences of others, especially those whose stories have been ignored. Choosing to have hard conversations about justice, about equity, about love, even when it's uncomfortable. Love in action might mean being the person who notices what others ignore. In Jesus' story, the priest and the Levite saw the man but did nothing. They were physically present but emotionally absent. But the Samaritan noticed and responded. He didn't just glance at the man's situation, he entered into it. Here's the truth. You don't need a platform, a title, or a perfect plan to love others well. All you need is a willingness to show up. Maybe it's your friend who's going through a tough time and doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe it's your coworker who feels overlooked. Or maybe a stranger you see struggling in a small but significant way. Showing up doesn't mean you have to fix everything. It just means being present, offering what you have, and letting God use it. The story of the Good Samaritan and the stories we celebrate during Black History Month remind us that love has the power to cross boundaries. It has the power to heal wounds and transform lives. But love only works when it's put into action. It's not enough to say we care. It's not enough to post a nice quote or share a hashtag. We have to live it out. The Samaritan didn't just feel bad for the man on the side of the road. He took action. He gave time. He gave energy and his resources to meet the immediate need right in front of him. And that's what God calls us to do, to love with our hands and feet, not just our words. So what small seeds of love can you plant today? Who is God putting in your path? Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member or a stranger. Don't wait for someone else to step up. Don't cross the road because it's easier. Be the one who notices, who stops and loves. Because when we choose to show up, when we move toward the mess and let love take action, God uses us to change lives. And sometimes the life he changes most is our own. And that's what God calls us to do. Small steps of love, simple acts of kindness, sacred moments of showing up. It's as simple as listening to someone who feels unseen, sending that "How are you doing?" text, sitting with someone who's struggling, or choosing to speak up when silence would be easier. These small steps ripple out in ways we may never fully see. And what's even more beautiful is this. When we choose to love others like this, we reflect the heart of God. Remember, God didn't stay distant when he saw us on the side of the road. He didn't look at our brokenness and decide it was too messy, too complicated, or too costly. No, he crossed the greatest road of all. Jesus stepped into our struggles, our sin, and our suffering. He picked us up, he cleaned us off, and he carried us with his grace. His love wasn't about what we deserved. It was about who he is. That's the kind of love we're called to share. Love that doesn't come with conditions. Love that doesn't keep score. Love that doesn't ask, "What's in it for me?" but instead asks, "How can I serve?" Here's the thing. Real love disrupts our comfort. It challenges us. It challenges our pride. It pushes us beyond the boundaries we've drawn, but it also transforms our hearts. When we love others the way Jesus loved us, we begin to see the world differently. We start to see people not as interruptions, but as invitations, opportunities to love, serve, and shine light in dark places. And maybe you're still wondering, where do I even start? Start with what's in front of you. God has placed someone in your path, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or maybe even a stranger, someone who needs your kindness, your time, or just your presence. You don't have to wait for a life-changing moment to show love. Often it's in the small moments that God works in the biggest ways. Every time you cross the road to love, every time you choose compassion over convenience, you're doing something that matters, something that reflects the very heart of God. So let's stop asking, "Do I have to love them?" and start asking, "How can I love them?" Let's stop looking for loopholes and start looking for opportunities. Because the road to Jericho isn't just a story, it's a reality we walk through every day. When we choose to see the world through lenses of love, we start to notice what others overlook. We see people as God sees them, beloved, worthy, and created in his image. And as we love others in small, faithful ways, we discover that God is shaping us too. So let's make the choice to cross the road. Let's make the choice to love, because that's how real change happens. One neighbor, one act, one heart at a time.